The rain hammered against the windows of our small cottage in the Cotswolds, each drop a painful echo of the storm brewing inside me. For 20 years, this place had been our sanctuary, a testament to the life Wynne and I had built together. Or so I thought. I'm Cormac, a 46-year-old IT specialist, and until a few weeks ago I believed I had it all. A loving wife, a comfortable home, and a life filled with quiet contentment. Wynne, with her fiery red hair and infectious laugh, had been my rock, my confidant, the very air I breathed. We met at a local pub, the Green Dragon, during a folk music night. Her voice, clear and strong, had captivated me, singing traditional Welsh ballads. I was smitten. We married 2 years later, promising each other forever. Now forever felt like a cruel joke. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. Wynne, a primary school teacher, began working late more often. Staff meetings, she'd say, her eyes flitting away from mine. I didn't think much of it. Teachers are overworked, underpaid, and perpetually stressed. I chalked it up to that. But then came the hushed phone calls, the ones she'd take outside, even in the biting winter wind. Just work, she'd assure me, her voice tight when I inquired. I wanted to believe her desperately. Trust was the foundation of our marriage, wasn't it? Then there was the change in her scent. Wynne always wore a light floral perfume, something delicate and understated. But lately, I'd catch whiffs of something different, something musky and unfamiliar. I dismissed it as a new hand lotion, a gift from a colleague, anything but the truth that was slowly, sickeningly dawning on me. The final straw came during our anniversary. 20 years. I had planned a special weekend getaway to Bath, a city we both loved. I booked a charming bed and breakfast, made reservations at our favorite restaurant, and even arranged for a horse-drawn carriage ride through the historic streets. Wynne seemed excited, or at least she pretended to be. But the morning of our trip she announced she couldn't go. A school emergency, she said, her voice strained. I have to be there. I was disappointed, of course, but I understood. Duty called. Go, I told her, forcing a smile. I'll reschedule. Instead of rescheduling, I decided to surprise her. I knew how stressed she'd been, how much she needed a break. So after a few hours, I drove to her school, a small, quaint building on the outskirts of town. I had a picnic basket filled with her favorite treats, a bottle of champagne, and a heart full of love. I imagined her face lighting up when she saw me, a brief respite from the chaos of her day. But what I saw wasn't relief or joy. It was something far more devastating. Her car wasn't in the parking lot. That's odd, I thought. Maybe she had to run an errand. I decided to wait. An hour passed, then another, still no Wynne. I started to feel uneasy. I called her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Driven by a growing sense of dread, I decided to drive home. Maybe she had forgotten something. Maybe she had a change of plans. As I turned onto our street, I saw her car parked in front of our house. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by a chilling premonition. I parked my car and walked towards the house, my heart pounding in my chest. The front door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The scene that greeted me will forever be etched into my memory. Wynne was in our bedroom, in our bed, with another man. Not just any man. It was Kieran, our neighbor, a man we had known for years, a man we had considered a friend. They were tangled together, oblivious to the world, lost in their sordid embrace. The air was thick with the scent of cheap perfume and betrayal. I stood there, frozen, unable to speak, unable to move. The picnic basket slipped from my grasp, the champagne bottle shattering on the floor, the sound echoing through the silent house. Wynne gasped, her eyes widening in horror as she saw me. Kieran scrambled off the bed, his face flushed with shame and panic. "Cormac," Wynne stammered, "it's not what you think." "What I think?" I roared, my voice shaking with rage and disbelief. "I'm standing here looking at you in our bed with him. What else could it possibly be?" Kieran, the coward, mumbled something about needing to leave and scurried out of the house, avoiding my gaze. I wanted to grab him, to beat him senseless, but I couldn't take my eyes off Wynne. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted, had just shattered my world into a million pieces. "How could you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "How could you do this to me?" To us, Wynne started to cry, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know," she sobbed. It just happened," I repeated, my voice laced with sarcasm. "Did it just happen for the past few weeks? The late nights, the secret phone calls, the different perfume. Was that all just happening?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. The truth was written all over her face. I turned and walked out of the house, leaving Wynne sobbing in our bedroom. I didn't know where I was going, what I was going to do. All I knew was that I couldn't stay there, not for another minute. I drove aimlessly for hours, the rain blurring the already indistinct road. I thought about our life together, the good times, the bad times, the times we had laughed, the times we had cried. Was it all a lie? Had she ever truly loved me? As the initial shock wore off, the anger began to simmer. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and utterly heartbroken. I had given Wynne my heart, my soul, my entire life. And she had thrown it away without a second thought. I spent the next few days in a daze, barely eating, barely sleeping. I couldn't bring myself to go back to the house. I stayed at a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, trying to make sense of what had happened. Wynne called me constantly, leaving pleading messages on my phone. She begged me to come home, to talk things over, to give her another chance. But I couldn't. I couldn't face her, not yet. The pain was too raw, the betrayal too deep. Finally, I decided to call my best friend, Gareth. He had always been there for me, through thick and thin. He listened patiently as I poured out my heart, offering words of comfort and support. "Come stay with me for a while," he said. "Get away from all this. Clear your head." I took him up on his offer. I packed a bag and drove to his house in Manchester, a city I had never been to before. Gareth welcomed me with open arms, offering me a warm bed, a hot meal, and a listening ear. For the next few weeks, I stayed with Gareth, trying to rebuild my shattered life. He helped me find a therapist, someone who could help me process my emotions and navigate the difficult road ahead. I started attending support group meetings for people who had been betrayed by their partners. It was comforting to know that I wasn't alone, that others had experienced similar pain and survived. Slowly, gradually, I began to heal. The anger started to subside, replaced by a quiet determination to move on, to build a new life for myself. I knew I couldn't stay in Manchester forever. I needed to go back to the Cotswolds, to face Wynne, to deal with the practicalities of ending our marriage. I returned to our cottage a month later, armed with a divorce lawyer and a steely resolve. Wynne was waiting for me, her eyes red and swollen. She looked defeated. "Cormac," she said, her voice trembling, "I'm so sorry. I know I've hurt you more than I can ever say, but I still love you. Please give me another chance." I looked at her, really looked at her, and I realized that I didn't love her anymore. The woman I had loved, the woman I had married, was gone. She had been replaced by someone I didn't recognize, someone who was capable of such deep betrayal. "It's over, Wynne," I said, my voice firm. "I can't forgive you. I can't trust you. I need to move on." She started to cry again, but I didn't offer her any comfort. I had given her all the comfort I had to give, and she had thrown it back in my face. The divorce was long and painful, but I got through it. I sold the cottage in the Cotswolds, the place that held so many memories, both good and bad. I used the money to buy a small apartment in Bristol, a city I had always wanted to live in. I started a new job, made new friends, and began to explore my interests. I took up photography, joined a hiking club, and even started learning to play the guitar. I was determined to create a happy, fulfilling life for myself without Wynne, but the scars of her betrayal remained. I found it difficult to trust women, to open myself up to the possibility of love again. I was afraid of being hurt, of being betrayed, of being made a fool of. One day, while browsing through a local art gallery, I met Bront. She was a painter with a kind smile and a gentle spirit. We struck up a conversation about art, about life, about the things that mattered to us. I found myself drawn to her honesty, her vulnerability, her genuine warmth. She listened patiently as I told her about my past, about my marriage, about the betrayal that had shattered my world. She didn't judge me. She didn't offer empty platitudes. She simply listened, offering me a safe space to share my pain. Over time, Bront and I grew closer. We started spending more time together, going to movies, attending concerts, taking long walks in the park. I found myself laughing again, feeling alive again. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could love again. One evening, as we sat on a bench overlooking the city, Bront took my hand. "Cormac," she said, her eyes filled with tenderness, "I know you've been hurt. I know it's hard for you to trust, but I want you to know that I would never do anything to hurt you. I care about you deeply." I looked at her beautiful face, at her kind eyes, and I knew that she was telling the truth. I took a deep breath and leaned in, kissing her softly on the lips. It was a new beginning, a chance to rebuild my life, to find happiness again. I knew that the scars of Wynn's betrayal would always be there, but they wouldn't define me. I was stronger than I thought, more resilient than I knew. And with Brant by my side, I was ready to face whatever the future held. But fate, it seems, had one more twist in store for me. A few months into my relationship with Brant, I received a letter. It was postmarked from the Cotswolds. My heart sank as I recognized Wynn's handwriting. I hesitated for a moment, then tore open the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The words were scrawled in a shaky hand. "Cormac," the letter read. "I need to see you. It's important. Kieran is not well. Please come." I stared at the letter, my mind reeling. Kieran. What could possibly be wrong with Kieran? And why would Wynn need me? I showed the letter to Brant, explaining the situation. She looked at me with concern. "Do you want to go?" she asked. I didn't know. Part of me wanted to ignore the letter, to pretend that Wynn and Kieran didn't exist. But another part of me felt a sense of obligation, a nagging curiosity. "I don't know," I said. "I feel like I should go just to see what's going on." Brant nodded. "Then go," she said. "But be careful. Don't let them manipulate you." I drove back to the Cotswolds the next day, my heart pounding in my chest. As I approached our old cottage, I felt a wave of nostalgia wash over me. So many memories, both good and bad, were tied to that place. I parked the car and walked towards the house, my steps hesitant. Wynn opened the door, her face pale and drawn. She looked even worse than the last time I had seen her. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice barely audible. "Please come in." I stepped inside, my eyes scanning the familiar surroundings. The house was a mess, cluttered with dirty dishes and piles of laundry. It was a far cry from the neat, orderly home Wynn had always kept. "Where's Kieran?" I asked. "He's in the bedroom," Wynn said. "He's been sick for weeks." I followed her to the bedroom, my heart pounding in my chest. As I stepped inside, I saw Kieran lying in bed, his face gaunt and his body emaciated. He looked like a ghost of his former self. "Cormac," he croaked, his voice weak. "Thank you for coming." I stood there, stunned, unable to speak. I had expected to find Kieran arrogant, defiant, unrepentant, but he was none of those things. He was simply a sick, broken man. "What's wrong with him?" I asked Wynn. "He has cancer," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "It's terminal." I stared at Kieran, my mind reeling. "Cancer? Terminal? How could this be?" "So sorry, Cormac," Kieran said, his eyes filled with tears. "I know I hurt you deeply. I never meant for any of this to happen." "Did you do it?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I don't know," he said. "I was stupid, selfish. I thought I was in love with Wynn, but I was wrong. I ruined everything." Wynn started to cry, her body shaking with sobs. "Never loved him, Cormac," she said. "I was just lonely, vulnerable. I made a terrible mistake." I looked at Wynn, at her tear-streaked face, at her broken spirit. I felt a flicker of pity, but no love. The love was gone, replaced by a deep sense of sadness. "I forgive you, Kieran," I said, my voice quiet. "I don't condone what you did, but I forgive you." Kieran closed his eyes, a tear escaping from the corner of his eye. "Thank you," he whispered. I spent the next few hours with Wynn and Kieran, listening to their stories, offering them comfort. I learned that Kieran's cancer had been diagnosed shortly after our divorce. Wynn had been taking care of him ever since, sacrificing her own life to care for the man who had betrayed me. As I drove back to Bristol that evening, I felt a strange sense of peace. I had forgiven Wynn and Kieran, not for their sake, but for my own. I had released the anger and resentment that had been poisoning my soul. I knew that my life would never be the same. The scars of Wynn's betrayal would always be there. But I was determined to move on, to build a new life for myself, to find happiness again. And with Brant by my side, I knew that I could. Kieran passed away a few weeks later. I attended his funeral, offering Wynn my condolences. She looked at me with gratitude, her eyes filled with a sadness that I understood all too well. "Thank you for everything, Cormac," she said. "You're a good man." I nodded, unable to speak. I knew that she was right. I was a good man, and I deserved to be happy. I returned to Bristol, to Brant, to my new life. I had faced my demons, forgiven my betrayers, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. The rain had stopped and the sun was finally shining through the clouds. Life, I realized, is full of unexpected twists and turns, but it's how we respond to those challenges that defines us. I had chosen to respond with forgiveness, with compassion, and with a determination to find happiness, no matter what. And as I held Brant close, I knew that I had finally found it.